Hello and welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by BJ Cunningham to break down our two games on Monday's slate: NLCS Game 2, ALCS Game 1, going down at 4:08 p.m. between the Mets and the Dodgers. 1:08 p.m. local start after these two teams played at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. local last night. So less than a 24-hour turnaround for these two teams. The Dodgers also sitting on a 33-inning consecutive scoreless streak, which has tied the 1966 Orioles for the longest ever in a single postseason. They broke the National League record last night, which I believe was around 30 innings. In terms of today's Game 2 matchup, the Dodgers are going to go with a bullpen game after Jack Flaherty tossed 7 innings last night. You saw how effective that was for them against the San Diego Padres. Basically twice they did it. Now, they're going to avoid Walker Buehler, who originally would have been lined up for this game on full rest. I've heard people say that he's going to start in Game 3. Yoshinobu Yamamoto would be on 4 days of rest for Game 3. If they're going to keep him on his Japanese schedule, with 5 days of rest, he wouldn't be available till Game 5. So potential for Buehler or Yamamoto for the Dodgers in Game 3. I would imagine what happens in Game 2 will be a bit determinative of their Game 3 plans. BJ Cunningham, I have some thoughts on this game. It is my New York Mets, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on this game as well. I made the line plus 117. I made the total 7.7. So I'm curious what your projections are for this matchup, but I am on the Mets and the under. I will give out more analysis why in a second. So what did you project this game at? And what are you betting for Mets Dodgers Game 2?
Yeah, with the Dodgers going to the bullpen game, I have the Dodgers at minus 123, and I have the total at 8.1. So, obviously I know you grabbed an under 8.5 early. I would have liked to grab that, but I missed that. So now we're sitting at 8. And I'm kind of in a limbo. I think what's interesting here is what happens with Sean Manaea. We know, obviously, the Dodgers are going to go with a bullpen game. The Mets bullpen was used heavily last night because, Kodai couldn't go very long. And, Manaea's, all of his props are set pretty high, indicating that they need him to go long, essentially, in this game. His outs prop is at 16.5, strikeouts 5.5. The Dodgers, though, I mean, this if you're somebody who maybe missed the early line or you don't want to pay a significant price, I think Manaea under 16.5 outs is interesting. He's obviously pitched very, very well down the stretch. He's been very, very good over the second half of the season. Stuff plus on that sinker has gotten a lot better. But the Dodgers crush left-handed sinkers. They have a 401 expected weighted on base average against them this season. Obviously, Manaea is somebody, he's going to face 3 of the Dodgers' top 5 hitters are lefties, so he'll have an advantage there. But beyond that, the Dodgers can stack a bunch of righties against him, which I'm not sure really helps him. So it's a very interesting of what's going to happen here. Again, with the Dodgers going to the bullpen game, I mean, the bullpen hasn't allowed a run in 3 games. So it's tough for me to sit here and potentially make a bet on the Mets, even if it is creeping a little bit higher there. But I just think Manaea's props are kind of interesting right now. I don't know if we're probably not going to float to 17.5 on his outs prop, but I think there is a chance the Dodgers hit him and the Mets really don't have a choice and they got to bring him out. But again, no bet for me on this game so far, but I would be maybe looking at some of the Manaea unders in this game.
Yeah, if he is effective and the game remains close, I would expect him to go in or stay in a little bit longer than he otherwise might. One, because he's been their most effective pitcher of late, but two, they used both David Peterson and Danny Young, their only 2 lefties in their bullpen in Game 1 on Monday. I wasn't too happy with the Peterson usage because I think they needed to use him as more of a loogie, or not that you can use a loogie anymore, but as a lefty specialist in this series to counteract Freeman and Muncy and Ohtani and Gavin Lux, rather than being used in more of a long relief role. The Mets have Tyler McGill to use in a long relief role behind Senga. They really should have saved Peterson to neutralize the Dodgers' left-handed hitters in this series. And for that reason, I think Manaea is likely to get left in potentially a little bit longer in the start, maybe 2 times through the order, and then faces Ohtani, Freeman, Muncy again before coming out. 2.8 expected FIP for Manaea against lefties on the year, 435 against righties. Now, why has he been their most effective pitcher? Well, if you happen to watch his last start against the Phillies, they were showing some pretty cool bullpen work from Manaea, stuff I've never seen before, where he was standing. There's two
Yeah.
mounds typically in a bullpen. He was standing on the left-hand mound, throwing to the catcher on the right-hand mound. So literally throwing an entire cross-body motion to try to find the right arm slot. Because in late July, he tried to copy Chris Sale's arm slot and get more of a sweeping action, more of a whipping action on his pitches. And he's also modified his pitch mix. He started throwing his sinker much more aggressively, and the arm slot sort of modified his slider into more of a sweeper. Now he's getting like 17 inches of horizontal run on the thing. So, as you saw with the Phillies, they were taking some very uncomfortable at bats against him. They also moved their pregame hitters work. They moved the L screen like way over past the pitcher's mound too, so they could also try to adjust to that attack angle Manaea is throwing from. So very unique and awkward, and I'm curious how the Dodgers handle it because they've faced Manaea a decent amount in his career. They have 150 plate appearances as a team against him. They also faced him in April, but they haven't faced this version of Sean Manaea, the fully sidewinding, optimized version of Manaea. So I'm curious to see how the Dodgers approach him, how they look against him today. But I do think this is just a completely different pitcher over the first or over the final 3 months of the season than what you've seen to this point in the career from Sean Manaea. Also, underlying metrics, strikeout minus walk rate up 5% from 14% to 19%. Expected FIP down from 4.3 to 375. So he's been a very good pitcher. All the Mets fans wanted him to start in game one. And the fact that they used multiple relievers behind him for multiple inning stints, Reed Garrett and Jose Buto also went multiple innings. I think he may get left in this game just a touch longer tonight. So I'd probably go over or pass on his pitching props. On the other side, the Dodgers, it should be illegal for a team to injure 7 of their starting pitchers and then get to play a bullpen game in the playoffs because they didn't arrive here on their own merit. They arrived here by accident, right?
Yeah.
They're defaulting to a bullpen game because they have to. They're not going to a bullpen game because it's their most optimal path forward. And that's what annoys me about it is they've been in this situation for 3 years now, 4 years, where all of their starting pitchers get hurt during a season. And then they throw out the crappy ones during the playoffs, or they throw out the guys who are like only mildly injured during the playoffs, or an aged Clayton Kershaw in the playoffs. Now they've gotten so many guys injured that they're like, we have no choice but to go to a bullpen game. So that annoys me a little bit. Truly, it does, because again, like it's not a decision they made to be most optimal about. I will give them credit not jettisoning it, but like pushing Walker Buehler aside and saying, no, a bullpen game is our better option for game two. Yeah, they finally made the right decision there. But they started Walker Buehler in game two against the Padres, and that obviously backfired. And they were lucky to get through that series by their bullpen just being unbelievably elite. But yeah, I do think Dave Roberts shuttling arms in and out today, not letting anybody pitch through trouble, does lower the projected total on this game. The Mets are not going to get a second look likely at any pitcher. If somebody does throw bulk innings for the Dodgers, it is likely to be Landon Knack, who threw one inning, I believe, last Wednesday, would still be on full rest, had he even started that game. But you should be on full rest, should be able to turn over the lineup once for the Mets, I'd imagine, and then you'll probably get 6 or 7 other different Dodgers pitchers in from there, off day tomorrow, and then they get 3 straight days of games 3, 4, and 5. So you don't want to tax the bullpen too hard, because you do get 1 off day before 3 games on 3 straight days. You can't tire the bullpen out too aggressively today, but considering how deep Flaherty went last night and getting the off day, they can push it a little bit more aggressively in game 2. So my price targets, I made the Mets plus 117. I made the total 7.7. So Mets plus 122 or better, and the total at 8 minus 102 or better. I bet those last night at plus 125 and 8.5 minus 110 respectively. BJ, any final thoughts on this game before we move on to ALCS game 1?
No, I think, yeah, like it'll be very interesting to see how long Manaea will actually last in this game, and to see how, the Mets bats got to get going. Like 0 runs in the first game. If they're going to face a bunch of different arms, they got to get going. So otherwise this series might be over quick.
Very well might. Getting a little nervous immediately. They just took some very bad at-bats last night. Flaherty looked good after some additional rest. We'll see if he has to pitch again in the series, not getting extended rest if his arm fatigues like it did late in the year. I still think that's a possibility for him in this postseason. Yankees and Guardians game one going down tonight at 8 p.m., 8:08 p.m., or my apologies, 7:37 p.m. Eastern time in the Bronx. This is the seventh postseason meeting between these two teams since 1997, a very active postseason history between Cleveland and New York. I projected the Guardians at plus 136 in this game. I made the total 7.1. I like Cleveland at plus 142 or better. I also like the under 7.5. If it came down to minus 106, it will probably not. It is currently minus 115. Bigger picture perspective. I'll break down this game in a second. I want to throw it to BJ first, but bigger picture perspective, the Guardians are the one team showing value for me, both on the series money line, the AL pennant line. Those are the same thing, or their World Series odds. I make their World Series odds right now plus 464, 17.7%. You can get as high as plus 550 out there on Cleveland. Now, I did give out the Yankees AL pennant odds before the ALDS, so I don't want to have, the same amount right on Guardians plus 170 to win the ALDS and the Yankees at plus 150 to win the ALDS. You could hedge the position. You could try to find a way to guarantee yourself a profit, or you could just wait and skip ahead and bet the Guardians to win the World Series. So basically, I have my Yankees AL pennant ticket at plus 150. I think a half a unit. So that would win 3/4 of a unit. And I put 2/10 of a unit on the Guardians to win the World Series at plus 550. So if the Yankees ticket loses, still alive to a Guardians World Series ticket and could still win, up to a half a unit if that cashes. If the Yankees win, that Guardians World Series ticket obviously dies, but I'd still profit over a half a unit on that Yankees ticket. So instead of hedging it directly, I'm just taking a small stab on the Guardians World Series odds at this point. If you have nothing, if you have no pre-bet allocations on the Yankees, if you have no positions right now in the futures market, Guardians World Series plus 550, Guardians AL pennant plus 170. I think that's fine down to about plus 160. And the World Series odds I'd take to plus 500. BJ, Guardians Yankees game one. What's your projection and what are you betting?
I have the Guardians at plus 128, and I have the total at right around at 7.59. So I'm right around where the market is, but I do actually like the Guardians in this game quite a bit. I think that they're going to go with a similar approach with Alex Cobb that they did in this previous start. I think it was game 3, right, against the Tigers. So Cobb, it's interesting because Cobb obviously didn't pitch towards the end of the season because he had that blister on his finger, and it was a significant one that going into the postseason, even he couldn't even throw pitches because he obviously couldn't grip the ball, and so he went into that start. I know you mentioned in your article how his stuff plus in those 3 starts they made during the regular season was actually pretty good, and if you watched his sinker was actually moving pretty well against the Tigers. He was having a little difficulty controlling it, but it was moving pretty well in and around the zone. If the plan is just to have him pitch the order 1 or, basically until he gets into trouble and then heavily utilize your bullpen, I think that gives the Guardians a pretty decent advantage in this game. Carlos Rodon was better over the second half of the season. He was not good in that start against the Royals, gave up 7 hits. And Rodon is somebody that likes to utilize his fastball up in the zone quite often, but he wasn't very effective with it during the season. 395 expected weighted on base average allowed on those fastballs. Cleveland had a 114 weighted runs created plus against lefties this season, but not only that, they were 6th in Major League Baseball in expected weighted on base average against elevated left-handed fastballs. Now, Rodon's velocity was up in that start against the Royals. He went from, he's averaging about 95 during the regular season. He was averaging 97 in that start against the Royals. But even with that being so, he's not very good against right-handed hitters. A lot of 330 weighted on base average to them this season. So the Guardians, if you look through who they can platoon and get into their lineup, it's about 7 right-handed hitters that they can throw at him. They have a bunch of switch hitters as well. So I think if the Guardians are going to heavily utilize their bullpen and not let Alex Cobb go too deep in this game, I think that gives them an advantage. Now, over the course of the series, we'll see how that bullpen usage really plays out because they're probably going to have to let Tanner Bibby go pretty long in game 2. Otherwise, like you said, playing 3 games in a row, even off a rest day, makes it kind of difficult. So I don't know if we're going to see Gavin Williams, if we're going to see Cantillo as a bridge guy to get to the bullpen maybe. But otherwise, if the Guardians bullpen is going to be heavily involved, I think there's some value on them here in game 1.
Yeah, Cobb, his strikeout prop is juiced basically the same 2.5, about
Yeah.
minus 165 to the over as it was for his start against the Tigers. So the book's kind of indicating that his usage should be about the same. The reason why I think he might go deeper, the Guardians really use their bullpen very heavily in the final 3 games of their series against the Tigers. If they do need a rest, it is probably today. So I think there's a chance Cobb could go 4th inning. That said, his outs prop was 12.5 plus money to the over for his last start, and he only went through 3 innings. He could still pitch an extra inning today and still go under that outs prop. So keep an eye to see where that outs prop opens. The market for that has not opened yet. His strikeout prop, his hits props are up. As I said, they're juiced basically to the same levels that they were for his last start when his outs prop was 12.5 to the over. He didn't even clear that. And I think he pitches deeper today's game, and he still may not clear that. So just if it's 11.5 over at plus money, I'd probably be interested. 12.5, I'm passing. I think it should probably be put right at 12. Now, in terms of the Guardians offense, also consider the fact not only are they facing Rodon, they faced Tarek Skubal in 2 of their past 4 starts. Now they're dropping to Carlos Rodon.
Yeah.
And it's not an apples to apples thing. It's not like, okay, like we faced Randy Johnson, now we're facing Jamie Moyer. Huge drop off in talent. Well, got different guys throw different pitches. That might be a tough matchup, going from Johnson to Moyer, right? If you're facing a guy throwing 102, then you're going to a guy throwing 84. The difference in pitch speed may screw you up. But no, Rodon is very 4-seam and slider heavy. And what I like for the Guardians is that Skubal is using 4-seam slider sinker to get to his changeup. Rodon is using his 4-seam to set up his slider and vice versa. And the Guardians really hit 4-seam fastballs well. They struggled against sinkers this year. So I think that the pitch types are a better matchup for them. Obviously, it is their better split, which I think you got to. They were much better against lefties than righties this season. 114 WRC plus against lefties, 95 against righties. That's 8th versus 20th. In the second half, 108 and 88, 11th and 27th, respectively, lefty versus righty. So it's their much better split as an offense. Rodon's strikeout prop is juiced minus 150 to the under 5.5 here. I'm surprised it's that aggressive. I would have betted it about minus 125, but as a result, I like his under on the outs at 14.5 at plus money. I bet plus 120 yesterday. It's down to about plus 110 today. This Yankees bullpen has had 3 days off. Their fan base does not trust Rodon, and Aaron Boone does not trust Rodon. And if he gets in a jam in the 4th or 5th inning here, I think he gets lifted for a well-rested bullpen. He's also inefficient with his pitch count. He does strike a lot of guys out. But as a result, he typically is like hitting the 80 pitch mark by the 4th inning, 5th inning. So there's a lot of pass to Rodon not getting 15 outs here, whether he's purely ineffective because it's the Guardians' better split, or he gets the strikeouts and that pitch count goes very high, or the Guardians just grind him down because they do not strike out against left-handed pitching. They were second against lefties in strikeout rate in the second half, about 18.5%. They were 21.7% against righties. So they're just much tougher across the board against left-handed pitching. I think they make this a tough matchup for Rodon. If they're going to grind his strikeout total under 5.5, I think it means he comes out before 14.5 outs. So guards under 14.5 outs, unless they're just hitting weakly hit balls into play and helping Rodon be efficient, I think they help grind it over, grind him out before halfway through this game. Now, on the other end of the matchup, this is a really tough matchup for Alex Cobb. Again, I'd lean to the over on his usage, but the Yankees see the second most pitches per plate appearance in baseball. Four pitches per at bat per plate appearance. They also are the best offense in baseball against right-handed pitching, and it's just like got to be impossible for Cobb to be efficient in this game. So that's why I'd lean over. I'm probably not betting any of his overs. And then the last thing is the power discrepancy between these two teams. As I said, they've played each other a lot in the playoffs, and more often than not, the Yankees have had a big power edge when these teams go head to head. Even 2022, the last time these teams played, which was 2 years ago, the Guardians at the time had the youngest roster in MLB. Detroit now has that title. But Cleveland came in just like playing small ball, guards ball all year, and they ranked 29th in homers that season. The Yankees were first. The Yankees were 4th in slug. Yankees are 1st and 4th in homers and slug this year. So the same exact rankings. The Guardians are 12th and 16th in homers and slug. They were 29th and 21st when these teams met in 2022. So they've raised the power ceiling of the team. And why is that important? Well, ESPN regularly flashes that stat. Since 2018, if you win the home run battle in your game, you have an 85% chance of winning said game. So if you want to win a playoff game, out homer your opponent. The Yankees are generally doing that compared to their competition. The Guardians are generally not doing that compared to their competition. But this year, they do give themselves a bigger chance of doing so. They've just added more power to their roster overall. Obviously, Jose and Josh Naylor have been great, but even guys like David Fry, providing a boost. And Quan has been electric. Even if they're not getting homers, Quan is getting a lot of extra base hits and getting on base constantly. So I think this Guardians team is a big chance against the Yankees. I would imagine everybody is kind of overlooking them because they've seen how easy the path has been for New York to this point. But they are the value team, the Cleveland Guardians, and they have an elite bullpen. They just need to win games early in the season. They need to win a game like this, to win this series, because once you get into the back end of the rotation, the Yankees have a big starting pitching edge, over Gavin Williams or Ben Lively or Joey Cantillo or Matthew Boyd is fine and effective, but the Guardians don't have a four starter, basically, is what I'm getting at, where the Yankees can roll through Cole and Schmidt and Luis Gil and Carlos Rodon. And if Rodon is going to give them good innings, this team is very dangerous.
Yeah, I agree.
BJ, any prop thoughts on Yankees and Guardians game one?
Yeah, Rodon under is definitely interesting. I would definitely play that. I think, honestly, I know Cobb has a bad matchup. It just depending on his usage, plus money on under 3.5 hits is kind of interesting to me. Depending on what they do with the long relievers. I know he has to go deep in this game, but he got into trouble against the Tigers. He gave up 2 runs, and it just seemed like Vogt was like, we're not going to let this go any longer, pretty much. So I have a feeling that might happen again here. So those unders are kind of interesting to me. But other than that, Rodon, I'm with you on Rodon under 14.5 outs. Like you said, he definitely gets up in the count quite a bit, and I think that Cleveland has a pretty decent matchup against him. The other thing I'll mention and this kind of goes against Cleveland in a sense, is that the Yankees are the best team against right-handed sinkers as well, which is not ideal, which, they're the best team against right-handed pitching. So, usually if you're the best team against right-handed pitching, you can hit fastballs and sinkers. So, but yeah, another one I'll mention just for the overall series, Stanton 8-1 for ALCS MVP is kind of interesting, given how well he hit the ball against the Royals. And obviously Judge and Soto didn't hit the ball very well. So if Stanton's able to continue to hit the ball pretty well during this series, 8-1 is a decent price.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about for sure. All right-handed pitchers aside from Rodon, or I guess Matthew Boyd as well in this series. So mostly right-handed starting pitchers. If you're thinking about who's going to get better matchups, the left-handed hitters on both teams aren't going to get neutralized too heavily, though. The Guardians can play matchups with their bullpen, I suppose. I don't really trust the Yankees bullpen. I think Cleveland has a pretty substantial bullpen edge. And if this game or if this series gets to a lot of tight late situations, the Yankees do have the better offense, but the Guardians have the better bullpen. And I think it's going to make it pretty interesting. Also defensively, in terms of sprint speed, the Guardians are a league average team. They're much faster, though. The Yankees are both 30th in sprint speed and 30th in base running value this year. New York does not take extra bases. They're just waiting station to station, waiting for that 3-run bomb. The Guardians are going to go first to third just a little bit more often. So small ball against power, but the Guardians injecting a little bit more power into the baseball this season. And we'll see how that wind is blowing in Cleveland, because I do think that was a big contributing factor. It's not like they raised the overall power level of this roster. They did raise, though, their park factor in right field, which helped boost their overall power numbers. But just to reiterate, the Guardians are the value team for me, both in the World Series market and in the AL pennant market. I would bet those again to plus 500 and plus 160 respectively. On the Guardians money line for game one to about plus 136. And then also on the under 8 at minus 105 or better, and Rodon under 14.5 outs at plus money. And then lastly, the Mets and the under 8.5 in between the Mets and the Dodgers. I should not have mentioned the Yankees under. It's just Rodon and the Yankees money line. I'd actually, I'm kind of avoiding the Yankees under, even if it gets into range, by some chance, if it got to my price target, considering Rodon's potential to blow up, considering the fact that the Guardians bullpen was really overused in the final 3 games of that Tigers series, I worry if one of these teams gets out to a multi-run lead that it could turn into a blowout. And I don't really want to be betting the under 7.5 in a game where one team might win 8-0. I think that's a pretty distinct possibility today. You kind of see something similar, right? Like this could go one-sided.
It's also just from a weather standpoint. Now it's going to be cold. It's going to be 50 degrees, cold and chilly in Yankee, but the wind is going to start out blowing 17 miles an hour out to right field. So both those things kind of counteract each other if it's obviously going to be colder and windy. But yeah, I think there's definitely potential for Rodon to blow up. As we were recording this, I was looking, Sean, there is a book that is posted under 15.5 on Rodon. It's juice minus 165 right now, which is obviously pretty high, but we may see a 15.5 pop as we go throughout the day here. So if you're listening to this, maybe wait a little bit and see, and you probably can get a decent plus number by game time anyway. So just be on the lookout for that.
Every half out to me worth about 40 cents. So, 60 or 15.5 at minus 160 is about equivalent to 14.5 at plus money. Just, if you're looking at different lines out there, that's roughly how to adjust them, about 40 cents per half out. It's the same thing with it's actually a little bit less for half runs in the first 5 innings. Half runs in the first 5 innings is like 30 cents. So yeah, just keep that in mind if you're searching for the difference between 15.5 at minus 160 and 14.5 at even money. It's basically the same number you're betting into there. But that will do it for us for Monday, October 14th. For BJ Cunningham, I'm Sean Zerillo. Thank you for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and leave us that 5-star rating and review. Also, check out the Action Network Discord. You can find a link in the episode description of this podcast. We'll see you back here tomorrow for more MLB playoff best bets and ALCS Game 2. For BJ Cunningham, I'm Sean Zerillo. Thanks again for listening to Payoff Pitch. We'll see you next time.